I've said it a couple times. The audience should refrain from
Cursing.
applause. Ms. Brame, though, thank you for that powerful testimony. Mr. Holden, you are now recognized for your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Jordan, and thank you, Madeline, for your courage.
Pull that close, Councilman. Pull that real close.
I am Robert Holden, a Democratic City Council member representing the 30th District in the Borough of Queens and a member of the Council's Public Safety Committee. I am here to address the lawlessness that has taken over this city in recent years as a result of the failed progressive policies implemented by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. On his first day in office, Bragg issued a memo that would decriminalize a broad range of offenses and reduce charges for violent crimes. This was a signal for every criminal that it was open season on law-abiding citizens in New York County. These failed progressive policies reverse 30 years of law and order delivered to the city by the hardworking men and women of the NYPD and professional prosecutors that put victims' rights ahead of criminals. Under Bragg, minor crimes such as resisting arrest, trespassing, fare evasion, prostitution are no longer prosecuted, which has led to a marked increase in criminal activity on the streets of Manhattan. Serious offenses such as knife-point robbery, commercial and residential burglaries, weapons possession, and low-level drug dealing are being charged with lesser offenses or being plea bargained down, resulting in shorter sentences or no jail time at all. Bragg's first year in office was marked by a dramatic shift in the way his office approached criminal prosecutions. And we're feeling Bragg's soft-on-crime approach in the streets of New York. We have repeat offenders receiving lenient sentences and committing multiple crimes shortly after being released. This is happening every day. From the day he took office, it seems Alvin Bragg's top priority was to keep criminals out of jail and free to roam the streets. District Attorney Bragg would be better off as a defense attorney than a prosecutor. He downgraded over half of the felony cases to misdemeanors and declined to prosecute 35% fewer felony cases compared to 2019. And his office requested bail in 20% fewer felony cases in 2022. Sadly, Bragg's approach has resulted in lower conviction rates for serious felony charges, with his office winning a conviction rate of just 51%. It's miserable. And such cases brought in 2022, down from 68% in 2019. Even his misdemeanor convictions fell dramatically from 68% in 2019 in his office to 29% under his jurisdiction in 2022. It is important to highlight that we must compare numbers to pre-pandemic levels about crime to get an accurate picture of crime in Manhattan and throughout the city. Moreover, while stats show that crime is still much higher than before the pandemic, they do not tell the entire story. Mentally ill, homeless people verbally and physically attack people randomly on the streets and in the subway. Pharmacies lock up their products. The police officers also feel pressured to undercharge perps they arrest. This is a daily reality in New York. To address these challenges, we need our state legislators and district attorneys to prioritize public safety and work together to strengthen our criminal justice system rather than weaken it. The state legislature has failed us by passing laws that have weakened our criminal justice system and enabled criminals to evade justice. Federal prosecutors could help put more career criminals behind bars by charging the worst offenders with federal crimes instead of letting progressives like DA Bragg bring prosecutions under weakened state laws. We are losing people by the tens of thousands to safer cities and states that offer a better quality of life. We must take swift action to ensure the safety and well-being of our communities. I applaud the House Judiciary Committee for examining the failed progressive policies in New York City and the refusal of DAs like Alvin Bragg to prosecute serious crimes. Public safety is paramount, and the committee should take the appropriate action to ensure that justice is served and our communities are protected. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. Ms. Fisher, you're recognized for 5 minutes. You may begin.
Good morning, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Nadler, and members of the House Judiciary Committee. My name is Rebecca Fisher, and I'm the Executive Director of New Yorkers Against Gun Violence, the only statewide gun violence prevention organization in New York. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. As a leader of New Yorkers Against Gun Violence, I have devoted my career to reducing gun violence in this state. I care deeply about the safety and well-being of New Yorkers and work day in and day out to support and uplift victims and survivors of gun violence. I am committed to the safety of New Yorkers, not only because it is my job, but because I am a very proud resident of New York City, and I am a parent raising my children here. Our team lives and works here also, and we all work with victims and survivors of gun violence and violence every day. We all want our city and our state to be as safe as it can be. We advocate for strong, sensible gun violence prevention laws and policies, and we also have a gun violence prevention education and victim service support program here in New York City public schools. Because New York State has strong leadership, we have some of the strongest gun violence prevention laws and programs in the country, and some of the lowest gun death and injury rates. New York ranks 47th lowest out of 50 states in gun violence rates. But New Yorkers are still being killed and injured by shootings each year, and that is because of the national gun trafficking crisis. The national gun trafficking crisis is largely the result of weak gun laws in other states and the fact that Congress has not enacted federal gun violence prevention reforms. Crime guns are illegally trafficked from weak gun law states in the South along the I-95 corridor known as the Iron Pipeline. In New York State, we are the model for the nation on strong gun laws because it's not easy to acquire them here illegally. But states along the Iron Pipeline have extremely weak laws, and as a result, traffickers travel to these states to buy guns without a background check from reckless and rogue gun dealers. They then illegally bring them back to New York, sell them on our streets, and then illegal guns are used in crimes. From 2017 to 2021, New York City recovered and traced over 19,000 crime guns, and over 70% of those crime guns were originally purchased out of state from Iron Pipeline states. The guns are flowing into our most under-resourced neighborhoods, disproportionately impacting Black and brown communities. Communities that need economic investment, affordable housing, better access to education and healthcare, and so much more. This is why we strongly support community-led initiatives that are evidence-based and trauma-informed, and they work, and also have our own school education and victim support program. Our school program, Reaction, provides social and emotional support to youth victims of gun violence, their families, and their schools. We partner with community violence intervention programs, local and national leaders and lawmakers, victim support organizations, and prosecutors and law enforcement. The COVID-19 pandemic of 2020 caused a national surge in gun violence across this country. However, as more resources are put back into the communities suffering the most, public safety circumstances are improving, including in New York City and Manhattan. In the last 12 months, according to NYPD's own data, as of April, shootings and murder are down in all 5 boroughs, including Manhattan. Crimes unrelated to guns are also going down in Manhattan and across the city. Yet, there is so much more that can be done by Congress to keep this city safe, because even one victim of gun violence is too many. Congress must close loopholes in the federal background check system, protect survivors of domestic violence, pass extreme risk protection order laws, pass safe storage laws, crack down on ghost guns, and hold rogue, reckless gun dealers accountable. We need more investment in community violence intervention programs, and we need to hold the highest drivers of crime accountable. New Yorkers and all Americans, from Buffalo, New York, to Nashville, to last night's victims of the Dadeville, Alabama shooting, and every place in between, deserve to go to school, to the park, to their office, to a concert, to a grocery store, to their houses of worship, or to celebrate this nation's independence without the real and present danger of gun violence. Our children and our children's children have the right to be safe, and we need Congress, we need federal leadership to stand up and protect us. Thank you for inviting me to testify today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Mr. DiGiacomo, you're recognized for 5 minutes. You may begin.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to speak here today. I just want to say that, District Attorney Bragg took an oath to uphold the law and not to downgrade crimes that have an effect on victims of New York City. The Detectives Endowment Association has been saying this for 3 years now, that a lot of the laws that have been enacted here in New York City and New York State are counterproductive to the safety of the people of New York City. The bail reform laws. There is a direct correlation from when the bail reform laws were enacted to day one to the uptick in violent crimes across New York City. Shootings have increased. Gun violence has increased. Illegal guns coming into New York City has increased dramatically. But we talk about the 7 majors, the felony crimes that are affecting people in New York City. But as important as those felony crimes that are violating the people across this city are many low-level crimes that are not even being addressed that affect the victims for many, many years to come. Sexually related crimes on the subways and throughout the city streets are increasing. Assaults on police officers are increasing. I ask everyone in this room to think about your daughter, your wife, your grandmother, your sister, your aunt, riding on a subway train, trying to get to work, and being violated or groped. Just for that poor woman to try and prosecute this crime through the Manhattan DA's office, and that crime is reduced to a disorderly conduct, which is no more than a traffic ticket. And that is going on every day in the borough of Manhattan, every single day. And it's sad because many of the people in the borough of Manhattan, the ones that vote for D.A. Bragg, they live here, but many people come to Manhattan every day to work. Hundreds and thousands of people come into this city, into Manhattan to work, and don't have the opportunity to vote for the district attorney. But their safety is in jeopardy because of the district attorney. Now, you had Police Officer Mora and Police Officer Rivera were executed. 2 young men were executed in the borough of Manhattan. And I strongly believe it was because of the memos that were put out by the district attorney's offices that they were not going to enforce assaults on police officers, resisting arrests on police officers. And it sent a message to the criminal element that there are no consequences when you assault a police officer. Now, my concern is the safety of my detectives and the people which we serve. And it's sad what's going on in this city because we have to start concentrating on the victims of crime and not the people that commit the crimes. You know, it's very sad when people are afraid to come out of their house at night in Upper Manhattan or Lower Manhattan. And when defunding the police was popular, the New York City Police Department had a homeless outreach unit that was very effective. It took these homeless people off the street, got them food, shelter, got them the medication or the help that they needed. And because of the defunding of the police, that unit was disbanded. And now, when you walk through every neighborhood in Manhattan, there are homeless everywhere because they tied the hands of the police. Laws have been enacted to tie the hands of the police. Our city council in New York City enacted a law called the Diaphragm Compression Bill, in which you have a non-compliant individual fighting you, and you can't put any pressure or touch the person from the bottom of the neck to the top of the waist, back and front. Now, I challenge anyone in this room to try and do that. It's impossible. But that law is enacted, and it's on the books. We also should have, back in the early 90s, late 80s, there was a narcotics problem. They appointed a special narcotics prosecutor. Because guns are so out of control now, we need to enact and appoint a special firearms prosecutor so everyone is on the same page in prosecuting gun-related crimes. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DiGiacomo. We now recognize Mr. Borgen for 5 minutes.
I'd like to begin by thanking Congressman Jim Jordan and other members of the committee for giving me the opportunity to testify. Nearly 2 years ago, on May 20th, 2021, I received a call no parent should ever receive. On the other hand, my son Joseph, who quickly told me he was okay, but be beaten out of Times Square. He was needing medical attention. He handed the phone to the NYPD, who were extremely helpful and very supportive, and did the best they possibly can. I was told they'd bring him to the emergency room in Bellevue Hospital. Without hesitation, I made a straight beeline straight to Manhattan, got in my car, and drove to Manhattan. I got to the hospital. It was hard to believe what my son looked like. His face was beaten. His face was sprayed with mace. They punched him. One fella hit him with crutches. In Times Square, broad daylight, all because he's wearing a yarmulke going to a pro-Israel rally. Now, I'm in New York my whole life. I'm 57, never had problems like this. It was just very shocking to hear this. It was just like horrible thing. My wife was at home. She couldn't come with me. It was COVID. Only one person go to the hospital. I sit in front of the community, 2-year anniversary of the attack rapidly approaching, and the ongoing struggle with D.A. Bragg. This has been going on for 2 years. They have a film of this in black and white from people on the street in Times Square. It's an open and shut case. And D.A. Bragg is just schlepping this case along with no solution, offering deal after deal. One fella, Wasim Awade, was hitting my son with crutches, was offered a sweetheart deal, didn't take it yet. He was let out on probation. As he's getting out of the court, as he's getting out of jail, the friends are dancing with him on his shoulder. He said, I will do this again. I will do this again. He had no qualms about doing it again, about beating up another Jewish person. And in fact, while he was out on bail, he had an incident with a road rage with an elderly man on the street. Bragg brought him in again, nothing. Just go out and behave yourself. This just emboldened him to act, and he doesn't care. I've been in 3 court hearings, and basically nothing has happened in 3 court hearings here in Lower Manhattan, a couple buildings down. And it's just very disheartening that I sit here today and nothing is getting done. My son Joseph was invited to the White House to appear in front of Joe Biden, our president, and a bunch of Kamala Harris and so forth. And this was not a partisan issue. There's an issue where they were beating up Asians in New York nonstop, no repercussions. Beating up Jews, pushing people in the subways, in the tracks, no repercussions. It's hard to understand what goes on. And here one fellow was offered a deal, no jail time. He only punched my son once. This is what Bragg was offering to someone. Hit my son once. Okay, one time. Okay, we'll give you a slap on the wrist. You go and play video games for 6 months. It's just disgusting. Now, in the past couple of years since the incident happened, my son had surgery on his wrist. He likes to play basketball. He's very uncomfortable to play basketball. And it's just some other things that affect his whole life. It's just a terrible, terrible thing. He has physical therapy 3 days a week. And these 6 individuals are walking the streets, roaming around like nothing, not a care in the world. And it's almost 2 years. I mean, unfortunately, down in Maryland, so it's 4 years. It's horrible. They're pushing plea bargains back before nothing gets done. We have heard from, when my son got beaten up by these 6 individuals, we heard from many politicians. But I must quote Mayor New Yorker. I called your office numerous times. I called Mr. Schumer's office, another Jewish New Yorker, numerous times. No one called us back. Neither one of you came out of statement on my son's incident. Okay? You're a Jewish New Yorker. You have Jewish roots here. Behavior like this enables D.A. Bragg to just do whatever he wants to do. If you guys would have come out with a statement from Washington and said, we condemn this beating to Mr. Borgen's son. We condemn we condemn this act. Maybe Mr. Bragg would have taken this case a little more seriously, and I call you out on it. And most of my friends, I am so disheartened with you and Mr. Schumer, you don't understand. We wouldn't vote for Mr. Schumer again if we still on that head. And if I lived in Manhattan, I wouldn't vote for you either. And I will tell you something else that bothers me. Everybody's here with gun control. Somehow the criminals can get guns. But the average person in New York can't get a gun. I just came back from Miami after 2 weeks. All my friends who moved out there, many of my friends, all have gun licenses. And there's a deterrent there. If someone goes after you, there's a chance that the person they're going to attack has a way to defend himself. Here in New York, we can't get guns. The criminals walk around shooting people, get guns nonstop. It's unbelievable. And a gun charge comes to Mr. Bragg. Misdemeanor, no problem, walk the streets. I remember Plaxico Burress, if you remember, the New York Giants was a wide receiver. He was in a nightclub. The Giants were 10-1. He went to a nightclub, accidentally shot himself with a gun. I think Robin Morgenthau was a DA at the time. Plaxico Burress went to jail for 18 months, if you remember. He was a football star in New York. They need him. They would run the Super Bowl again. Here in New York now, you come with a gun, okay, don't do it again. We'll see you again. It's just this disgusting, and it's a chutzpah what goes on. It's a Jewish word, chutzpah. What goes on in this district, I haven't been in Manhattan for social events. I will not come for a restaurant. I'll not come to the garden for a ball game. I won't go to a Broadway show. I'll not set foot in Manhattan. I have a friend of mine who likes to go to Broadway shows, matinees. You know what they do now? They get a group of 30 people. They get on a bus, park in front of the theater, walk into the theater. Don't walk around, no shopping. Then they get on a bus, go to a predetermined restaurant, and they walk out to the restaurant, go on a bus, and go home. That's all the interaction I have in Manhattan. I'd just like to say thank you for listening to me, and I hope some good comes from this.
Thank you, Mr. Gorgon. We please pass along our best to your son. The chair would just ask the press. We'll plenty of opportunity to get all the pictures, all the whatever you want. But if you could just maybe stay back a little bit, particularly when the witnesses are testifying, I think that would just in appreciation of the witnesses taking time to be here, that would be much appreciated by them. Mr. Kessler, you are recognized for your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan and Ranking Member Nadler.
Pull that mic close, Mr. Kessler.
Thank you to members of the committee and to fellow witnesses, some of whom have suffered the deepest and most unfair personal losses. And thank you to Kylie Murdoch, my research assistant sitting behind me. But to members of the committee, I've got to ask, why are we here? Why are we in New York City? Yes, in this massive city of 8.5 million people piled atop each other on a speck of land barely 300 square miles in size, awful things happen, awful crimes happen, awful losses are suffered. But as unfortunate and tragic as it is, we live in a violent country like no other advanced nation, and the fact is that New York City is not only safer than most large cities in America, it is safer than most cities of any size, and on a per capita basis, New York City is safer than most of the states of the members sitting on the dais on the majority side. In 2020, for example, New York City's murder rate was 18% below the national average for the entire United States. Mr. Chairman, Ohio's murder rate was 59% higher than New York City's. Louisiana's murder rate was 251% higher than New York City's. The murder rate in Texas was 42% higher than New York City. South Carolina, 126% higher. Florida, 32% higher. Kentucky, 70% higher. North Carolina, 57% higher. Indiana, 72% higher. Arizona, 35% higher. Alabama, 119% higher. A hearing about the ravages of crime could be in Alabama with its towering homicide rate and a mass killing that just happened yesterday, or Louisville, where 5 people were murdered in the blink of an eye at a downtown bank, or the murder capital of California, which is not Los Angeles or San Francisco or Oakland, but in Speaker McCarthy's district of Kern County with its county seat of Bakersfield, and it has been the murder capital of California for 6 years running. I'm focusing on the year 2020, but it's not just that 1 year, it's the entire century. From 2000 to 2020, if New York City was a state, its murder rate would rank smack dab in the middle at 22nd in the nation and be about 1/4 the murder rate of the entire state of Mississippi. And the borough of Manhattan is even safer than the rest of New York City. From 2000 to 2020, Manhattan's murder rate would rank 30th among the 50 states. I need to say a word about guns and about the politics of crime because A, 79% of homicides are by firearm, and B, I had both the pleasure and misfortune of working on the Mike Dukakis for President campaign, and I know how potent and irresistible the issue of crime is in politics. If someone is a victim of a gun crime in New York City, dollars to donuts, that gun was not originally purchased in New York State. And I'll double down and bet that crime gun originated from either Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, or Virginia. There is massive gun trafficking that ferries guns from those 5 southern states with weak gun laws up I-95 to states like New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. And I know this because in 1996, I was working for a Brooklyn congressman from Park Slope named Chuck Schumer. And we FOIA'd the FBI data for every gun in America that was recovered in a crime and successfully traced. And we uncovered gun trafficking patterns all across the nation. And practically nothing has been done legislatively ever since except to make it harder, much harder, to get data on the origin of crime guns. That brings me to the politics of crime. Wouldn't it be great if this hearing was about how illicit guns are trafficked to places like New York City, Newark, Boston, Philly, Chicago, and on, and how those guns terrorize the innocent people living in those places and elsewhere? That's the sort of thing Congress would do if it really cared about what was happening with regard to crime in New York City. Mr. Chairman and Mr. Nadler, there are 8.5 million people living in New York City on this tiny plot of land. Bad things happen here, no doubt. But the miracle of New York City is how well this enormous chunk of humanity mostly gets along and suffers less crime than much of the nation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Kessler. We will now proceed with 5-minute questioning. We're going to try to move through pretty quick and, like I said, stick to the 5 minutes with members. If any of our witnesses need a break, water break, restroom break, just let us know and we'll do that. We can maybe go one at a time and keep going, or maybe we'll take a 5-minute break. Just signal us and let us know. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Florida, Miss Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today and being willing to share your stories with us. I served my community as a prosecutor and as a judge, and a prosecutor has an absolute responsibility to work with the men and women of law enforcement to uphold the law, to protect the community, and to consult with crime victims and their families to be sure that their voices are heard in our criminal courts. When crimes aren't prosecuted and when judges are prevented from setting appropriate bail, or when violent criminals are released out on the street and allowed to reoffend because of reckless bail policies, the criminal justice system is failing victims of crime. But it is not just my work as a prosecutor and as a judge that informs me for this hearing today. I am also a mother. And we need to begin this hearing today by remembering that the victims of these soft on crime policies, the victims of these reckless bail reform policies, aren't just numbers. They are people and lives that are forever harmed or lost. Each of them reflects a failure in our criminal justice system. With that, Ms. Brame, I would like to return to your story. Would you please begin by sharing with us a little bit more about your son?
Excuse me, is that the way my son was murdered or my son as a person?
As a person, please.
Sergeant Hassan is the oldest of my 5. He was 35 years old at the time of his death. He is a father of 3 small children, Jason, Jordan, and Jaylani, my 3 grands. And also Hassan was a husband. He was an amazing young man. He was a personal physical trainer at Crunch Gym at the time of his murder. He was also a full-time student at Manhattan College. Hassan was a responsible, licensed, and registered gun owner, all right? He was a good guy with a gun.
Do you believe that the criminals who murdered your son received justice?
That the criminals who murdered him?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely not. You know, even the stabber, they offered him a plea deal. Instead of the 25 to life, he copped out to 20 years. Okay? The other brother is the only one who actually went to trial and he